the Void King. Alpha Varen, feared across 5 territories, not because he is feral, but because of what he did at the Eastern Valley to end a war. He is in full command of himself. His monster is his reputation, his silence, his absolute refusal to explain himself to anyone. This is more frightening than a beast and more romantic than a broken man. The child's curse, born with her wolf already present, considered an omen of doom. 5 years old, has never hurt anyone, talks to birds, helps old women carry water. The village has blamed every misfortune since her birth on her existence. They call it the Harbinger Mark. They have been leaving her at the forest edge in the harvest ritual since she was 2. She always comes back. This year, the elders have decided she will not. The love interest, Kala, a healer from the next village who has been advocating for this child for 2 years and failed every time. She is there on the day of the ritual with one plan and no backup. Every village has a story about the thing that lives in the dark forest. In most villages, the story is not true. In the village of Ashmore, the story was absolutely true. The Void King was real. Alpha Varen of the Nightwood territory had ended the war of the Eastern Valley by himself, in wolf form, in one night. And no one who had been there would say what they had seen. They would only say that the war had ended, and that they were grateful they had been on the right side of it, and that they did not want to discuss it further. His wolf was the largest anyone had seen. His territory was the most feared in the region. He did not take a Luna. He did not explain himself. He had ruled for 11 years, and he had been called the Void King for 8 of them, and he had never once corrected anyone who used the name. Every harvest season, he rode through the lower territories to collect tribute. He had ridden through Ashmore before without stopping. This was the year he stopped. Not because of the tribute. Not because of the elders who met him at the gate with their careful diplomacy and their careful eyes. Because of the child. She was 5 years old, and she was standing at the edge of the forest where the village had left her, and she was not crying. She was watching a bird in the branches above her with the focused attention of someone who had made peace with her circumstances and found other things to think about. His wolf saw her first, and his wolf, which had not responded to anything with softness in 8 years, went completely still. She heard them coming. She looked over her shoulder at the enormous black wolf with its scarred shoulders and its reputation that preceded it by several miles, and she studied it for a moment. Then she said, with the calm observation of a 5-year-old, "You are very big." The Void King's wolf sat down. The tribute collectors exchanged a look that none of them would discuss later. And the healer from the next village, who had been standing at the tree line for the past hour having run out of ideas, put her hand over her mouth. Something was about to change. "My name is Sansa. Welcome to Sansa Romance Oracle. This is the story of the child nobody wanted, the monster who stepped forward, and the woman who had been fighting for that child alone for 2 years, who suddenly found she was not fighting alone anymore." Prologue. The ritual they had always done. The ritual was called the Returning. This was what the elders of Ashmore called it. And the name was important to them because it framed what they did in terms of the forest receiving something back, rather than the village discarding something unwanted. The framing made it possible to continue doing it. The child had been born 5 years ago during a solar eclipse. This was the first problem. Children born under eclipses were considered marked by the void, the space between light and dark, where things that should not exist came from. The midwife had noted it and kept her mouth shut, and the village elder had not kept his. The second problem was the wolf. Shifter children did not manifest their wolves until 5 or 6 years of age at the earliest. This child had been born already shifted, not fully, not in a way that was visible to the eye, but in a way that the village's 3 remaining elder wolves had felt immediately. A presence too large for a newborn. A wolf already awake, already watching, already fully formed in the body of an infant who could not yet hold her own head up. The elder had called it the harbinger mark. He had pulled 3 references from 3 separate texts to support this interpretation. The references all describe children born with the harbinger mark as harbingers of catastrophe. He had read them aloud to the village, and the village had listened, and the harvest that year had failed. Not because of the child, because of the drought. But the elder had the references, and the harvest had failed, and a cause had been available, and the village had made the connection that was easiest to make. The child's mother had died in childbed. This was noted. Her father was a traveling merchant who had not been informed of her existence and would not have been useful if he had. The child had been raised by the village in the loose collective way that villages raised children no one had claimed. Fed, clothed, sheltered, and carefully not loved. She had been brought to the forest edge for the first returning when she was 2 years old. She had come back the next morning. The elder had called this further evidence of the mark. The village had accepted this. The child had come back because things with the harbinger mark could not be easily removed. It required, the elder had found in a 4th reference, a returning at the proper ritual time, the harvest ritual. The last night of the full moon in autumn. She had been left at the forest edge every harvest since. She always came back. The elder had noted in the past year that this was becoming a problem. The milk sickness in the spring. The flooding of the lower fields in summer. 3 children with the cough that had lasted too long. This year, the elder had proposed a solution. This year, the returning would be different. This year, they would go deeper. The healer from the next village had heard about this plan through the trading network that connected the lower territories and had arrived in Ashmore 4 days ago to argue against it. She had argued well and at length and with considerable medical evidence regarding the actual causes of milk sickness and field flooding and autumn coughs. The elder had thanked her for her contribution and informed her that the decision had been made. She had not left. She had sent a message through the trading network instead. She did not know if it would reach anyone in time. She did not know if it would reach anyone at all. She stood at the tree line on the evening of the harvest ritual and watched the procession bring the child to the forest edge. And she had no plan left except to be there and to not let what was going to happen without a witness. The child came without fuss. She always did. She was 5 years old and her name was Pip, which the village had given her because she was small and because no one had put enough care into naming her to give her anything better. She had dark eyes and dark hair and a quality of stillness about her that was either frightening or peaceful, depending on who was looking at her. She walked to her spot at the forest edge. She sat down in the leaves. She looked up at the trees. The procession turned and went back toward the village. The healer did not move from the tree line. The child looked over and found her. "You are still here," Pip said. She did not sound surprised, just noting it. "Yes," said the healer. "They are going deeper this time," Pip said. She said it the way she said most things, without drama, simply as information. "Yes," the healer said. Pip looked back up at the trees. "I know," she said. The healer pressed her hand against her mouth and looked at the road, which was empty, and the forest, which was dark, and thought about the message she had sent 4 days ago and whether there was any universe in which it had been enough. Then the tribute procession crested the hill, and the Void King's wolf stepped out of the dark. Chapter 1. She was not afraid of him. Peep heard them before she saw them. She was good at hearing things, better than most, which the village had noted and added to the list of things that were wrong with her. She heard the horses first, then the wolves that ran alongside. Then the particular heaviness of something much larger than a regular wolf moving through the underbrush to the west. She looked in the direction of the heaviness. A wolf stepped out of the tree line to her left. She examined it with the careful attention she gave to everything. It was the largest wolf she had ever seen. Its shoulders came to the height of a grown man's chest. Its fur was the black of a sky with no moon. Its eyes were pale green, and they were looking at her with an expression she did not have a word for. Attention, maybe. The kind of attention that was not hostile and was not friendly and was simply complete. She looked at it for a moment. "You are very big," she told it. The wolf sat down. She thought about this. The wolves she had encountered at the forest edge on previous returnings had all moved away from her. They had sensed her wolf and gone sideways, the way animals went sideways around things they did not understand. This one had come toward her, and now it was sitting down. She considered the wolf, and the wolf considered her, and the leaves came down around them both in the way they did when autumn was doing its best work. She could feel the wolf inside her. She had always been able to feel it, the warm, bright presence that lived in her chest. Older than she was, more patient than she was, settled in a way she aspired to be. Her wolf was not frightened of the large black one. Her wolf was doing something she had not felt it do before. It was paying attention the way you paid attention to something you recognized without knowing from where. Horses on the road. Men in dark armor. A tribute procession. And at the front the man. He had dismounted. He was walking toward her. He was the size of a person who had never been told to make himself smaller and had not thought to do it on his own account. Dark hair, a scar through one brow, eyes that were the same pale green as the wolf's. She connected this. She looked between the man and the wolf. "You are both the same person," she said. He stopped. He looked at her. He had a face that kept everything behind it in a way that most faces did not. She had met faces like this before, usually on people who had been hurt, and had decided the best response to being hurt was to become a place where nothing could reach. She knew something about this approach. She had been working on it herself. "Yes," he said. His voice was the kind of low, that came from not using it for friendliness, just information. "Why did you sit down?" she asked, meaning the wolf. He looked at her. The question seemed to reach him slightly differently than most things reached him. She could not say how she knew this. She just watched his face do something very small. "I don't know," he said. She accepted this. She turned and looked back at the forest. The dark was complete now, and she could hear things moving in it that were not birds. "They are going deeper this time," she told him, the same way she had told the healer. Information, not complaint. He was quiet. She looked back at him. He was looking at the forest, then at the procession behind him, then at her. The calculation was happening on his face in a way that was unusual, because most of his calculations were entirely invisible. Then he looked at the village elder, who had remained at the edge of the road, and he said, very quietly, in the voice that had ended the war of the Eastern Valley, without raising itself, "Who authorized this?" It was not a question. The elder opened his mouth. Behind Varen, the healer from the next village closed her eyes and exhaled something that was not quite a word. Chapter 2. What the monster said. The elder was a man who was accustomed to having the last word. He had held the position for 23 years. He was educated, which in the lower territories meant something. And he had the 3 references and a 4th, and a long memory for the precedents that supported his decisions. He had survived 2 changes of territorial authority and 3 challenges to his position, and he had outlasted all of them through the simple method of being the person most willing to speak with conviction in a room where everyone else was uncertain. He was not uncertain now. He was, however, finding the Void King's attention considerably less manageable than he had anticipated. The tribute collections had passed through Ashmore twice in the past 4 years. On both occasions, Varen had been present. On both occasions, he had not spoken a word to anyone in the village beyond the minimum required. He had looked at nothing with any particular interest. He had taken the tribute and continued south. He had never stopped. He had certainly never dismounted. "My lord," the elder said, "we appreciate the honor of your attention, but this is a matter of village custom and village governance, and the ritual in question has been observed for." "The child," Varen said. The elder paused. Varen had not looked at him. He was still looking at Pip, who was sitting in the leaves at the forest edge and had gone back to watching the bird in the tree above her with the self-contained patience that was either her most uncanny quality or her most extraordinary one, depending on your perspective. "She is under village jurisdiction," the elder said carefully. "The mark she carries has been documented across 3 separate historical." "She is 5 years old," Varen said. "My lord." "She is 5 years old," Varen said again. His voice had not changed. It did not need to change. It was the voice that had said one word to 12 men in the Eastern Valley, and all 12 men had made a different decision simultaneously without further discussion. The elder stopped speaking. "What has she done?" Varen said. "Beg your pardon? What has the child done, specifically?" The elder collected himself. "The mark," he said. "The harbinger." "What has she done?" Varen said. "Not what she is, what she has done." The elder opened his mouth, closed it. The child had not done anything. This was, if you examined it with the wrong kind of rigor, one of the difficulties with the harbinger mark doctrine. The mark was a predictor. important. The child had not caused the drought, or the flooding, or the cough. She had simply been present during them, which was also true of every other living creature in Ashmore, but was being applied to her specifically. Nothing, the healer said, from where she was standing at the tree line. Her voice was controlled in the way of someone who had a great deal to say and was choosing to say it carefully. She has done nothing. She has never hurt anyone. She does not have a mark. She is a 5-year-old child with an early, manifesting wolf who has been blamed for every piece of bad luck this village has had in 5 years. The elder looked at her. "You are outside your jurisdiction," he said. "So is she," the healer said, nodding toward Pip. Pip had found a second bird. She was observing them both with equal interest. Varen looked at Pip. He looked at the forest behind her. He looked at the elder. "She leaves with me," he said. The silence that followed lasted long enough to be counted. The elder found the shape of a protest in his chest and looked at the Void King's face and felt the protest dissolve before it reached his mouth. "She has no kin," the elder said, which was not a protest. It was more like an exit. "She does now," Varen said. The healer's hand had come up to her mouth again. Pip turned around and looked at Varen with the same calm assessment she had given the wolf. "Are we leaving?" she said. "Yes," he said. She stood up and picked up the small cloth bundle that held everything she owned, which was not much. She walked toward him. She stopped in front of him and tilted her head back to look up at him. "You are very tall also," she observed. The tribute collectors had found reasons to look in other directions. "Yes," he said. She considered this information. "All right," she said, and put her hand up. He looked at her hand. He looked at it for a moment that lasted long enough for the healer to worry. Then he reached down and took it. Chapter 3. The Healer's Problem. Kala had a problem. The problem was this. She had spent 2 years trying to help this child and failing at it. And now the Void King had solved the immediate crisis in approximately 4 minutes and 40 seconds through the simple application of his presence and his voice. And she was standing at the tree line, feeling a complicated mixture of relief and humiliation and something else. She couldn't look at directly. She was also technically no longer needed here. Pip was safe. Pip was, in fact, currently walking beside the most feared alpha in 5 territories, holding his hand and informing him about the 2 birds she had seen, which had been brown and small respectively, and had been eating something off the ground in a manner she found interesting. He was listening to all of it. Kala should leave. She had a village to return to. She had patience. She had a reputation for practicality that did not include standing at the forest edge, watching a situation that had resolved itself and feeling things she had explicitly decided not to feel about men who were extremely powerful and apparently also capable of listening to a 5-year-old talk about birds with what appeared to be genuine attention. Once a genuine attention. She should absolutely leave. She was still standing there when Varen's second in command, a woman with silver, streaked hair and the expression of someone who had seen everything twice, appeared at her elbow. "He will want to know where she is going," the woman said. Kala looked at her. "Pip," the woman clarified. "She has no kin, no home. He has claimed responsibility. He will need someone who knows her history." Kala looked at Pip, who was now asking Varen, whether he had a name for his wolf, or whether his wolf was just also him with the same name, which was philosophically interesting, and she had thoughts about it. Calla looked at the village of Ashmore, which had sent this child to die in a forest for the 5th consecutive year. She looked at the road south. She did not have a plan. She had never not had a plan. She said, "I am a healer." "Good," said the woman with silver hair. "He does not have one." Calla picked up her bag. She told herself this was purely practical. The child knew her. The child trusted her. Someone needed to be there who understood what the past 5 years had been for Pip and could speak to it clearly and without mythology. This was entirely about the child. She fell into step at the back of the procession. At the front, Pip had moved on from the philosophical question about the wolf's name and was now asking Varen whether he had seen a wolf eat a pine cone and what sounds it had made, because she had heard a story about this and was trying to verify it. Calla watched Varen's face from a distance of 30 feet. He said he had not personally witnessed a wolf eat a pine cone, but that it sounded inadvisable. Pip said she agreed. It sounded inadvisable, but the sounds were apparently very funny. Something happened on Varen's face that was very brief and very carefully contained, and that Calla, from 30 feet away in the dark, absolutely should not have been able to see. She looked at the road. She told herself very firmly that she was here for the child. Chapter 4. What Pip required. Pip had requirements. Varen discovered this on the first morning. She required breakfast before she was ready to discuss anything. This was not negotiable and was communicated clearly. She required that the discussion of logistics, plans, and her status as a newly claimed ward of the Nightwood territory wait until after she had eaten something and had time to sit with it. Varen had entire armies that were more flexible about timing. He waited. She ate porridge with the focused efficiency of someone for whom food had not always been reliably available. Calla, who had taken a room in the way station, where they had stopped for the night, watched this and said nothing and kept her face very still in a way he had noticed she was good at. When Pip was done, she set her bowl aside and looked at him. "All right," she said. "Ask your questions." He had several. She answered all of them with the same directness she brought to everything, which was considerable. She was 5. She had been born in Ashmore to a mother who died and a father she had never met. She had lived in the common house. She had been brought to the forest every harvest since she could walk. She said this last part without inflection. Information, not wound. "The wolf," Varen said. She looked at him. "Can you feel it?" he said. She considered whether to answer this. He watched her decide. "Yes," she said. "It has always been there. Since before I can remember." He nodded. "Is that strange?" she asked. She had the tone of someone who already suspected the answer, but wanted it confirmed. "It is very rare," he said. She processed this. "Does it mean I am what the elder said?" she asked. "No," he said. She looked at him steadily. She had the particular look of a child who has been lied to kindly and has learned to measure the distance between what an adult said and what they meant. He said it again. "No." And then, because she was still measuring, "It means you are something very old and very strong." The elder was frightened of what he did not understand. Frightened people name things badly. She thought about this for a long time. Behind him, he could feel Calla listening from the other side of the room. He did not look at her, Pip said. The birds know I am not what he said. He looked at her. They come to me, she said. She did not say it with pride, just as an observation. Animals have always come. The elder said this was another sign. She paused. But I think if I were what he said, they would not come. The logic was sound. He said so. She nodded, satisfied. She looked at Calla. Calla, she said, will you stay? The way station was quiet. Varen did not look at the healer. He looked at his hands. He was aware he was interested in her answer in a way that was not only about the practical question of the child's welfare. He was interested in other things, apparently. He was still working out what to do with this information. I will stay for now, Calla said. Her voice was even. As long as you need me. Pip accepted this with a nod. She stood up from the table. There is a bird outside, she said, and went to the window to look at it. Varen sat at the table in the quiet that remained. He looked at the window. He looked at Calla, who was looking at Pip, looking at the bird, and whose expression, when she believed herself unobserved, was warm in a way her voice never quite was. He looked at his hands again. He had claimed a child in a village road on 4 minutes of instinct. He was not sure he had done a single impulsive thing in 11 years. He was also not sure he was sorry about it. Chapter 5: The Void King's Fortress. The fortress was not what Calla had expected. She had expected cold stone and dark corridors, and the general atmosphere of a place where warmth was a sign of weakness and comfort was suspicious. She had expected this because of everything she had heard about Varen in the Nightwood and the kind of man who ended wars alone in the dark. The fortress was cold stone and dark corridors. But there was a courtyard with 3 old pine trees that were clearly loved. Someone had cleared the snow from around their roots. Someone had laid fresh straw where the ground frost was hardest. There was a kitchen that smelled of bread, even at the hour they arrived. There were 4 horses in the stable, who all turned their heads when Varen walked through and did not shy. Horses shade from things they were afraid of. These horses turned the way dogs turned. Recognition and something comfortable in it. Pip had noted all of this in the first 10 minutes. She had also noted the portrait gallery. She had walked its length very slowly, studying each face, and at the end of it she had turned to Varen and said, "Is your family kind?" He had said, "Some of them." She had accepted this as satisfactory. The room they gave her was larger than the entire common house she had slept in for 5 years. She stood in the center of it and looked around with an expression of someone running a very thorough inventory. She said, "Is this mine?" "Yes," he said. She turned a full circle, taking it in. She said, "The bird can come in through the window?" The window was not currently open. He opened it. She said, "All right." She put her bundle down on the bed. She looked at Varen. "You can go," she said, which was the same tone she had used for all of their conversations. Not rude, simply practical. "I want to look at it by myself first." He went. He found Calla in the corridor. She was looking at the portrait gallery. She had stopped in front of a woman with dark eyes and a direct expression. "His mother," he said. She looked at him. "She looks like she asked difficult questions," Calla said. "She did," he said. Calla looked at the portrait for another moment. "The fortress is not what I expected," she said. He said nothing. She looked at him. Her expression had the quality it had. when she was deciding how much to say. "The trees in the courtyard," she said. "Someone tends them carefully." He said nothing. She tilted her head. "Why do they call you the Void King?" she said. He was quiet for long enough that she had started to turn away, assuming the question was not going to be answered. "Because I ended a war," he said. "And because I have never explained how. And because people prefer a monster to an uncertainty." She looked at him. He looked at the portrait of his mother. "What really happened?" Calla said. He looked at her. She held his gaze without flinching, which most people did not do. She had the quality of someone who had looked at difficult things in her work and had learned to keep her eyes open. "I made a decision," he said. "A hard one. And I did not think the people I made it for deserved to carry it. So I carried it." Calla was quiet. "That is not a monster," she said. He looked away. "You are the second person to tell me that," he said quietly. She followed his gaze to the door at the end of the corridor. Pip's door. The bird had found the window already. They could hear its small sound from where they stood. 2. Chapter 6. What Pip Did for the Wolf. A month in the fortress. Calla had told herself 2 weeks. Then 3. Then a month. She was running out of time increments that sounded temporary. She was also running out of the pretense that she was here only for Pip. Pip was thriving. This was not too strong a word. Pip, who had spent 5 years being carefully not loved, had discovered what it was to be in a place that was ordered around her presence, rather than arranged despite it. She ate at the table. She had a bed she had not been asked to share. She had a window that she had established as a bird corridor, and through which she had introduced 3 separate birds to the fortress in the past month, all of whom had names. She had also, with the quiet determination that was her defining quality, begun working on Varen's wolf. Calla had noticed this gradually. The way Pip positioned herself near him in the evenings. The way she talked to him with the same deliberate consistency she had talked to the study door. Not asking for a response, not requiring anything back, just being present and offering the ordinary sounds of her day. The way she put her hand on his wolf's flank when she passed him in the courtyard, casual, as if touching him was simply what you did. The way his wolf's ears went back, not in threat, in something else. Every time she did. One evening, Calla found Pip sitting on the ground in the courtyard with her back against the black wolf's side, watching the stars come out. His head was turned away. He was watching the gate. He was in his wolf form most evenings. She had noticed this pattern without asking about it. He was easier in the wolf, less armored. Pip was telling him about Gerald the spider. She had heard this story from the child she had been fighting for 2 years. And Gerald the spider had apparently migrated from Ashmore in Pip's telling, and was now resident in the east corner of her room, and had been given a larger web on account of the window being a bird corridor. Varen's wolf made a very low sound. Calla stopped at the corridor door. Pip said, "That means you are listening." The wolf made the sound again. "Good," said Pip. "So Gerald, he has found a fly." Calla leaned against the door frame and watched this for a moment before she understood she was smiling, which she told herself was simply because the child was well, and this was a good outcome, and she was a healer, and good outcomes were satisfying. She went back to her room. She looked at her bag, which she had still not unpacked fully, because unpacking fully would imply she was staying. She thought about the portrait gallery, about a man who had ended a war by making a decision and had decided that the people he had made it for did not deserve to carry it. She thought about his face when Pip put her hand on the wolf's flank. She thought about the trees in the courtyard that someone tended carefully. She did not unpack her bag, but she also did not move it closer to the door. Chapter 7. The thing nobody had asked him. The Eastern Valley question arrived on a Thursday. Kala had not meant to ask it. She had been in the great hall, going through her medicines, and he had come in, and the room was quiet and comfortable, in the way the fortress had become. Gradually, over a month. A place where she had stopped bracing for the atmosphere she had expected and had started simply existing in the atmosphere that was there. She said, "You never told me what happened." He looked at her. "The Eastern Valley," she said. "What you did to end the war." He was quiet. She kept her eyes on her medicines. She did not look at him, because looking at him, when she asked him, things gave him somewhere to direct his refusal. And she had learned that he talks slightly more easily to a room than to a direct gaze. "There was a town," he said. She did not look up. "There was a town on the eastern ridge," he said. "About 2,000 people. The enemy had moved through it. They had taken hostages. They had planned to move south through the valley and take the next 3 towns the same way." She kept very still. "The only way to stop the advance," he said, "was to cut the supply line at the northern pass. That required moving 400 wolves through contested territory in 6 hours." She looked at her medicines. He said, "The only way to move 400 wolves through contested territory in 6 hours was to make enough noise at the eastern ridge that the enemy pulled their scouts back west." She breathed. He said, "A wolf making enough noise at the eastern ridge to pull 300 scouts back from the northern pass." He stopped. She understood what he was not saying. "1 wolf," she said. He said nothing. "You went alone to the eastern ridge," she said, "to create enough noise to move 300 scouts so your 400 could get through the pass." He said, "It was the most efficient solution." She looked up. He was looking at the fire. "You could have died," she said. He said, "It seemed less important than the alternative." She looked at him for a long time. "And the town," she said, "the hostages." He was quiet. "When the scouts pulled back," he said. His voice had the particular flatness of a man recounting something he has rehearsed into neutrality. "When the scouts pulled back, the garrison in the town was reduced. My second moved on the garrison. The hostages were freed." He looked at his hands. "All of them," he said. Kala was very still. "That is not," she said carefully, "the story I have heard." "No," he said. "What have you heard?" she said. He looked at the fire. "That I went to the Eastern Valley alone," he said, "and that I did something terrible, and that the war ended." "Did you correct it?" she said. "The story." He was quiet. "People prefer a monster to an uncertainty," he said. "A man who would go to the Eastern Ridge alone to save 2,000 people is a man people would follow anywhere. That is a dangerous kind of story." Kala stared at him. "So you let them think the worst version," she said. He said nothing. Which was the answer? She looked at her hands. She looked at the fire. She looked at a man who had walked alone into the Eastern Valley to save 2,000 people and then accepted the monster story to protect his own army from the kind of loyalty that got people killed. She said, "That is possibly the most idiotic thing I have ever heard." He looked at her. "And the kindest," she said. He looked away again. Calla put down the medicine she was holding. She walked across the room. She sat down beside him. Not close, just closer. He did not move away. They sat by the fire in the quiet fortress, and outside the courtyard the pine trees held their snow, and somewhere upstairs Pip was explaining something to Gerald the spider, and the fire burned low between them. He said, "You are still here." She said, "Yes." He looked at his hands. "Why?" he said. She considered the answer for a long time. "Because the trees are tended," she said. "And because you listened to a 5-year-old talk about birds for 4 consecutive evenings. And because I have been here 2 months, and I have not once heard you be unkind to anyone." He was quiet, she said. "And because every time I try to leave I find a reason to stay, and I have run out of pretending the reasons are only about Pip." The fire made a sound. He turned his head and looked at her. She looked back. His face did the thing it had been doing more frequently in the past weeks. The control loosening, just slightly at the edges. The Void King retreating a fraction. The man underneath present and visible and entirely directed at her. "I do not know how to do this," he said. He said it plainly, without shame. "I have been the thing people fear for a long time. I do not know what I am if I am not that." She said, "I think you are the man who tends the trees." He looked at her. "And the man Pip talks to," she said. "And the man who sat on the eastern ridge so that 2,000 people could go home." He was very still. She reached out. She put her hand over his on the armrest between them. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. He turned his hand over. His fingers closed around hers. They did not say anything else that night. But the fire burned until very late, and neither of them moved. Chapter 8, Pip's Assessment. Pip noticed everything. This had always been true. It was the quality that had kept her alive at the forest edge. The ability to read a room, and a person and a situation, before either had announced itself fully. She had been doing it since before she could talk. She noticed that Calla had stopped moving her bag toward the door. She noticed that Varen was in the Great Hall more often, and that when he was in the Great Hall, Calla was also usually in the Great Hall, and that this was not coincidence, because nothing Varen did was coincidental. She noticed that they sat closer together than they had in the first weeks. She noticed that when Calla talked, Varen's wolf made the low, listening sound that it had previously reserved for Pip's bird and spider updates. She had thoughts about all of this. She communicated some of them to Gerald the spider, who was a good listener, and some of them to the bird she called First Bird, who was less interested in emotional analysis and more interested in seeds. One evening she came downstairs and found them both at the table in the Great Hall and sat between them and ate her supper and looked between them and said, "Are you two going to be a family now?" Varen looked at her. Calla looked at her plate. "Because I think it would be good," Pip said, eating her bread, "for the fortress. It is too quiet and too big for 2 people, and I would like more birds, but I need someone to help me convince the window situation, and Calla is better at convincing things than you are." Varen said, "I am the alpha of the Nightwood territory." Pip said, "Yes, But Kala talks to people and they listen. You talk to people and they stop breathing. Kala made a sound. Varen looked at her. She had her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders were doing something that was not in keeping with the careful, controlled quality she usually brought to herself. She was trying not to laugh. He watched this. Something in his face did the thing it did around her now. The loosening, the small warmth at the edges. Pip looked between them with the satisfied expression of a person whose assessment had been confirmed. "Good," she said, and went back to her bread. Kala put her hand over her mouth again. Varen looked at the fire. He said, quietly enough that it was only for Kala. "She is extraordinarily perceptive." Kala said, equally quietly, "She always has been." The village could not see it because they were looking at what they feared. He looked at Pip. He looked at Kala. He said, "Will you stay?" Not for Pip. The question was clear in the way he asked it. Not for the fortress or practicality or the child's history. For me. That was what the question meant. Kala was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at him. "Yes," she said. It was a small word. The fortress was quiet around it. Pip reached for more bread. Chapter 9. What the village sent. The elder came in late autumn. He came with 2 of his men and a document from the regional council that was, in its careful legal language, a formal request for the return of Ashmore's ward to the village from which she had been taken without proper governance process. Varen read it. He set it on the desk. He looked at the elder, who was standing in the great hall with the careful diplomacy of a man who had made a calculation about how much authority the document gave him and was not entirely confident in the result. "She was not taken," Varen said. "She walked." The elder said, "My lord, the governance process for ward transfer between territories requires." "She walked," Varen said. "She held my hand." The elder opened his mouth. Varen said, "She held my hand, and she asked if they were leaving, and she picked up her bundle." "Where in your governance document does it describe that as taking?" The elder looked at his 2 men. His 2 men appeared to have discovered the middle distance. "She is a ward of the Nightwood territory," Varen said. "She has been formally registered as such with the regional council." He indicated the second document on his desk, which was the registration, which had been filed 6 weeks ago, and which the elder's document was therefore arriving too late to contest. The elder looked at the registration. "The harbinger," he began. "Does not exist," said a voice from the door. Kala had come in from the courtyard. She had mud on her boots from the garden, where she had been working, and she had a look on her face that Varen had come to understand meant she had been patient about something for a long time and had decided the time was over. She walked to the desk. She set down a document of her own. "That is a medical analysis of every misfortune the village of Ashmore has attributed to Pip over the past 5 years," she said. "Drought, caused by the 3rd consecutive dry summer in the lower territories, documented by the regional weather records. Field flooding, caused by the collapse of the old drainage channel on the eastern side, which I visited and inspected. The cough, a seasonal respiratory illness that passed through 12 other villages that year, none of which had a harbinger child." She looked at the elder. "The harbinger mark," she said, "is a story you told to explain bad luck that had nothing to do with her. You told it because it was easier than the drainage channel. The elder looked at his men again. His men had found new sections of the middle distance. "The document stands," Calla said. "She is a ward of the Nightwood. She is registered, she is healthy, she is in school, she has 3 birds. If you would like to contest it, you are welcome to bring the matter before the full regional council, where I will present this analysis, and you can explain the drainage channel." Silence. The elder picked up his document. He folded it carefully. He said, "Good day, my lord," and walked out with his men. The great hall was quiet. Varen looked at Calla. She was looking at her document. She had the expression of a woman who had been building towards something for 2 years and had just completed it. He said, "You researched the drainage channel." "6 weeks ago," she said. "Before the document arrived. I knew it was coming." He looked at her. She looked back at him. Something moved between them that was warm and not at all about the elder, or the drainage channel, or any document. He said, "The analysis." She said, "I have 3 copies. Regional Council, my records, and yours." He said, "When did you?" She said, "I have been doing this since before I met you." She paused. "Some of us have been fighting for her without a fortress." He absorbed this. He said, "You never told me that was why you were there that night." She said, "I had sent a message through the trading network. I did not know if it would reach anyone. I went anyway because someone needed to be there." He looked at the door where the elder had left. He said, "You sent the message to me." She was quiet. "It was a long shot," she said. He said, "How long?" She said, "I did not know your territory's trading contacts. I sent it general. I hoped it would find someone." He said slowly, "I received a message through the trading network 6 weeks before the harvest ritual." She looked at him. He said, "I had already been planning to pass through the lower territories. The message made me change my route." She stared at him. He said, "I thought it was from the council." "The phrasing was formal," she said. "I was trying to sound official." They looked at each other across the desk. He said, "You brought me there?" She said, "I did not know it was you." He said, "You sent a message into the dark, and I was the one who received it." The great hall was very quiet. She said, "I suppose I did." He came around the desk. He stopped in front of her. He said, "I have been called the Void King for 8 years, and I have never once minded it, and now I find I mind it very much, because it is not the name you use, and I would rather have the name you use." She looked up at him. "What name is that?" she said. He said, "You call me Varen, just Varen. When you think I am not listening." She said, "I always know you are listening." He said, "Then you know I want it." She looked at him. At the man who had walked into a valley alone and tended trees and listened to a child talk about spiders and held the monster story so no one else had to. She said, "Varen." He said, "Yes, that is all," she said. "That is the whole name." He said, "I know. It is enough." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair back from her face, slowly, as if he had been thinking about doing it for a long time and was in no hurry now that he had decided. She said nothing. He said, "Stay," she said. "I already said yes." He said, "Say it again." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. He kissed her. Not the way a Void King kissed anything. Not the way the Eastern Valley, or the monster story, or 8 years of careful distance would suggest. Carefully, with the particular care of a man who had been carrying something heavy alone for a very long time and had just, for the first time, set it down. She kissed him back. Outside the window, the pine trees held their snow. Upstairs, Pip was introducing the third bird to Gerald the spider. She had already known how this was going to go. Chapter 10. The morning they were found, Pip found them at breakfast. She came downstairs and they were both at the table, which was not unusual, except that they were sitting on the same side of it now, which was new, and Kala had a cup of tea that she had not made herself, which Pip noted. She sat down across from them. She looked between them. She said, "I knew." Varen looked at her. She said, "I have known for a long time. Since the courtyard with the wolf." She paused. "Your wolf knew first. I felt it." Kala said, "You are 5 years old." Pip said, "I am almost 6. Varen said, "That does not." Pip said, "The wolf knows before the man does. This is very well established." Varen looked at Kala. Kala looked at her tea. The fortress was quiet and warm, and outside the window the courtyard was white with new snow. Pip ate her porridge. She said, "I would like a 4th bird." She looked at Kala. "You said you would help with the window situation." Kala said, "I said I would think about it." Pip said, "You have had 2 months to think about it." Kala looked at Varen. He said, "She has a point." Kala said, "You are supposed to be on my side." He said, "I am on your side." "I am also on her side." He paused. "The window can be larger." Kala looked at him. He said, "There is a south-facing room at the end of the corridor. Larger window. Better aspect for birds." He paused. "She has been eyeing it for 3 weeks." Pip said, "It has better light." Kala looked between them. She said, "You two have been discussing this." Pip said, "We discuss many things." She said it with a very specific satisfaction. Kala looked at the man who had walked into the Eastern Valley alone and tended pine trees and listened to a child spider updates for 2 months. He looked back at her. The fortress was warm. The snow came down soft and thorough outside. She said, "All right, the south-facing room." Pip's face did the thing it did when things went according to plan. She went back to her porridge. Varen reached across the table and put his hand over Kala's. She looked at their hands. She looked at him. He was watching the courtyard, the pine trees in the snow. The way the morning light came through the window over the trees he tended, and the birds Pip had imported, and the child who had walked out of a forest to take a monster's hand. He was, Kala thought, the furthest thing from a void. She turned her hand over. He looked at her. She smiled. Outside, first bird arrived at the window. It was going to be a good morning. Epilogue. What the forest remembered 1 year later. The Nightwood Fortress had changed. Not structurally. The stone was the same stone. The corridors the same corridors. The great hall with the same old fireplace and the same portrait of Varen's mother who had asked difficult questions. But there were 4 birds. There were 4 birds plus 2 seasonal ones who did not technically belong to Pip, but who had absorbed the information that there was a specific window in the south-facing room through which seeds appeared reliably and had adjusted their migration accordingly. Gerald the spider had an entire corner. The kitchen now made breakfast for 3 every morning, and the cook had adjusted the porridge recipe after a frank conversation with Pip about what constituted the correct level of sweetness. And the conversation had been respectful, and the porridge had improved. Kala had unpacked her bag. She had done it on a Tuesday, without ceremony. While Pip was at her lessons and Varen was in the courtyard, and no one was there to see it, which was how she preferred to do the things that mattered most. She had put her medicines in the cabinet beside his. She had put her books on the shelf. She had hung her coat on the hook beside the door. She was the Luna of the night wood. This was not how she had planned to spend this year of her life. She had planned to be in her village with her patience and her practical approach to things and her clear, uncomplicated understanding of where she was and what she was doing. She had plans for the drainage channels in 4 surrounding villages. She was on the regional council's medical advisory. She was training 2 younger healers in the village network. She did all of this from the Nightwood Fortress, where the south window was always open, and the pine trees were always tended, and the most feared alpha in 5 territories listened to her with a particular, focused attention. He had previously reserved for military briefings. He was the Void King. He was also Varen, just Varen, who drank his tea too hot and woke before the light and always knew where she was in a room without looking, and had said, once very quietly, that the 2 years before she arrived had been the longest he remembered, and that he had not understood why until she left the first morning, and the fortress went wrong in some way he had not been able to name. She had said, "That is extremely inconvenient to hear 2 months after the fact." He had said yes. She had said, "You could have said something." He had said, "You were about to leave and I did not know the words." She had said, "You could have tried." He had considered this. He had said, "Stay." She had said, "That is 1 word." "That is not." He had said, "Stay, please. I do not know the other words yet, but I will find them." She had stayed. He had found them. On the year anniversary of the night at the forest edge, Pip insisted on a cake. This was not negotiable. She had opinions about the cake. She communicated these opinions to the cook with her characteristic directness, and the cook, who had learned over 12 months that Pip's directness was not hostility, but investment, had listened to all of them and produced a cake that Pip inspected from multiple angles before declaring acceptable. They ate it in the Great Hall. All 3 of them. And the fire was high, and the birds were asleep in the south room, and Gerald was in his corner, and Kala had her hand over Varen's on the table. And Pip was telling them, at length and with considerable detail, about the 4th bird's personality, which she had assessed as curious and a little bossy, which she said reminded her of Kala. And Kala said thank you, and Varen said he could see the resemblance, and Kala looked at him. And he looked entirely serious, and she understood he was not. She said, "You are funny," he said. "I have always been funny," she said. "You have not. You have been extremely not funny for the entire duration of my knowing you until very recently." Pip said, "He has always been funny. You just could not hear it because you were being practical." Kala looked at her daughter. She had not thought of her as that until she said it in her head just then. Her daughter. Pip, who had been left at a forest edge for 5 consecutive years, who had talked to a closed door and named her spiders and found birds in every place she had ever been, who had put her hand up in the dark to a man the whole world called a monster and gone home with him. Her daughter. The fire was warm. Varen was looking at her. She met his eyes. He had seen her realize it. He was very still in the way. He was very still when something mattered. She looked at Pip. Pip had moved on to the fourth bird's preferred seeds and was cross, referencing with first bird's preferences to see if they were compatible. Kala looked at Varen. She said nothing. He said nothing. He reached up and tucked the strand of hair from her face, the way he had on the first evening, slowly, as if there was no hurry. Outside the courtyard, the pine trees held the night. The forest remembered the child it had tried to keep. She was home. That is the end of Nobody Wanted the Child, the monster did. If the moment Pip put her hand up in the dark and Varen reached down and took it did something to you. You are exactly the person I make these stories for. Story 1 and Story 2 are also on this channel. A boy with a silver coin. A daughter who heard her papa's wolf. Start from the beginning. My name is Sansa. I will see you for the next one.